Hi, Chuck.
Hi, from New York. It's Saturday night.
Not quite. Not quite live from New York. It's thinking. There we go. We are now live. So welcome everyone. We are tasting today virtually through our May bottle bundle, which is 3 Winesap varietals and some of our favorites. So we've got Arkansas Black, we've got Black Twig, and we've got Old Virginia Winesap. And I think we're gonna taste them in that order. So if you're drinking along with us, let's go ahead and pop the Arkansas Black. And if you don't have the Arkansas Black, feel free to pop open whatever you'd like to drink.
So just a brief background for people who might not know. Winesap is the oldest apple in this group. Dates from somewhere in the 1700s at least. It was a traditional cider apple. It may have come from New Jersey. It may have originated in Virginia. Who knows? Who cares? It's a pretty good cider apple.
North versus south.
Its name implies that it's good for cider or wine. So that was the original apple. Apples don't come true from seed, and apples cross-pollinate and produce different varieties. That's how varieties originate. So somewhere along the way, in Northeast Tennessee, the Black Twig, which is originally named Twitty's Paragon, but became known as Black Twig. So it was Andrew Jackson's favorite apple. He was president in the late 1820s and early 1830s. So it tells you that early in the 1800s, Black Twig existed. Arkansas Black obviously came from Arkansas. It's pretty sure that some Winesap seedling. Winesap was one of the parents. Probably the mid 1800s, like 1840s and 50s. And to our knowledge, they were all used in cider making. A lot of apples used in cider making back then. They're all very excellent eating apples too. They're pretty distinctive.
Sorry for the disruption.
And they're a little different, but they're similar. They're all deep red apples, Arkansas Black being almost purple, hence the name Arkansas Black. And we think they make great cider, so we've been experimenting with varietals here somewhat. So the Winesap, no, Arkansas Black. So the Arkansas Black is the newest variety from 1840s to 50s. All these apples were picked in 2016, somewhere in late September to late October timeframe. They're late ripening apples. They were all pressed in, well, 2 of them were pressed in November of 2016. The Black Twig was actually pressed in, well, it was in December. So they were all pressed about a month or month and a half after they were picked. And they all have similar traits. If you have if you want to know all the details, I can go into that, but that's a lot of information. But
well, starting with this one though, I think Arkansas Black out of the 3 of them is the fruitiest of the 3. A little bit easier to sit and sip. I get a lot of red berry notes on this, like a tart cranberry or tart strawberry.
I do have to say, because of the acidity level of the apple, it's a little lower than the other 2. We did blend some pippin juice with this, about a quarter. So it's 25% Albemarle and Newtown pippin, 75% Arkansas Black. And we've held that since the first year. Although there's certain years it would probably stand alone. We just like to add a little more acid into this one. And that's a story of Arkansas Black.
I think the first year, I think how that started was the very first year we got Arkansas Black. Cider apple juice needs a certain acidity to ferment cleanly, and that first year the acidity wasn't high enough to have a clean ferment. So and then we just continued that ratio through years where the acidity was okay to maintain a little bit of consistency.
So anyhow, this one has a 7.7 ABV. That's probably because of the pippin we added to it. Pippin generally has a higher ABV, alcohol by volume. But these are all pretty similar in terms of alcohol. So, and that varies from year to year, but the 7 is a pretty decent year for this variety.
Yeah, I like it. This, if I recall correctly, Charlotte had said something about the Arkansas Black. Was this the one that came out of a breeding program in Arkansas, or gentleman who was?
None of these are out of a breeding program.
Okay.
That was probably Monarch or something.
Oh,
else.
Monarch,
That's a
which is
modern
also
one.
an Arkansas apple.
Yeah, it's a Monarch. And Arkansas Black and Black Twig are confused a lot. We have people come here thinking that they're the same apple, or that one is the other. I've heard stories of people thinking they had Black Twig and they bought it at a roadside stand. It's actually Arkansas Black. I went to an orchard and the man said he had Black Twig. Turns out he has Arkansas Black when I see the apple. So he didn't even know what he was growing. So there is a lot of confusion over these two names, but they're a very different apple.
I know.
Arkansas Black is a little more subtle in flavor and it's very hard, and its reputation as a keeper, it actually improved in flavor into the late winter when they didn't have cold storage. So Arkansas Black, you could pull them out in March and eat them. Black Twig you would eat first. So apples have purposes, and that was a purpose of Arkansas Black, in addition to being able to make cider from it.
Well, Tom Burford, who was a nurseryman from down in Lynchburg, who helped us get our start, he used to call it the best February apple he ever had because they would store into February. Terry is asking, is it a relatively low maintenance apple to grow?
Absolutely, it's probably the lowest of most of the apples we grow. Has a very tough skin. So, I mean, all apples are subject to insect damage, but it's more resistant, I think. And it doesn't, none of these apples are particularly prone to fire blight, which is great for us here in Virginia, because if any apple is prone to fire blight, it's going to get it here. I've been fighting it all week, so.
I'd say the one major issue with most Winesap varietals, so I know with the Arkansas Black and the Winesap, and I think the Black Twig, I've heard both ways, is pollination is an issue with those. So
well,
they're triploid, which among other things means that they're pollen sterile. So getting them pollinated as well as whatever is pollinating them, getting that pollinated back can be
well,
difficult.
you just can't use them as pollinators. Yeah. So if you're trying to grow an orchard, Tom told a story about Sweetbriar College put in a whole orchard of Winesap. They weren't getting any fruit production, so they had to go through the orchard and graft Grimes Golden into it to get pollination. And after that, they had production. So that's the issue with the pollen. Has nothing to do with the apple's taste or its performance in cider. If you're growing it, you got to be cognizant of what pollinates and what doesn't. So.
What do you think would pair with Arkansas Black?
Everything.
Well, it's your favorite, so that's not fair.
Well, all of these ciders I consider mineral forward. So they go with a lot of different stuff. They're not sweet because I don't make them sweet. So if you listen to chefs talk about pairings, sweet goes with spicy food, but you know what? I like this in my tacos, and I like this with a lot of food. So, and I like it by itself. So, all of these. If I was drinking Plum Mary, yeah, I'd probably want something really spicy to go with that because I don't like sweetness in my ciders. That tells you a little bit about me. Everyone's individual taste is different, though, so you have to judge it on your own taste. So
We had this, I think, once in a pairing dinner that was done at Dr. Ho's, which is a local restaurant down the road here. And it was paired with with pork and a cider sauce, if I recall correctly. It was really good. Might have even been made with.
It would, yeah, I think it goes great. As opposed to some of our other ciders that are sweeter or fruitier, like our Pippin or Gold Rush. Those are fish ciders. Maybe not so much Arkansas Black, but I've never been one to, I drink red wine with my fish, so don't pay any attention to what I say.
He's a red wine drinker through and through, no whites. Todd's asking, is Arkansas Black a low juice apple? Because it's so dense.
No, I don't think it, with the press we use, no. we get between 3 and 3.5 gallons, if the apples aren't too soft, and this one doesn't get soft, so yeah, we get 3 gallons plus per bushel.
It's a pretty good rate for us, usually 3.5.
Yeah, if you're using a hand press, you might have a little more trouble extracting it.
Would you have more trouble grinding it because it's a harder apple if you're hand grinding?
No, most grinders are going to go right through an apple. I mean, it's hard relative to apples. When you're dealing with stainless or steel against apple flesh, the steel is going to win. So you can grind it, but no, it's. I think it's great because we can press these apples, and we did them this year in February, or we did them earlier in 2016 for some reason. Actually, it's probably better to let it sit a little longer.
We have done that some years where we've
It's
just let
sweating.
it.
Well, the first year we did it in December 28th, and we've done it even later, and we did it later this year. So the fact that you can let an apple sit in cold storage that long and still get good juice production.
So the benefits of sweating are higher sugar content.
You want to get rid of, you don't want starch in your cider that you're fermenting. That's just a bad player. So you want it all starches to be converted to sugar. So when apples are ripening, if you eat one early in the fall when it's first picked, people say it tastes chalky or starchy. Well, you don't want that in cider. You want that to turn to sugar. In olden days, or in France or in Britain, they lay apples out on the ground to let them sweat. Sweating just means the starches are turning to sugar. And they do sweat, so they lose moisture, but the sugar gets developed, and that's what you really want when you're making cider. You don't want to have starches in there because starches can feed bacteria that you don't want to grow in your cider.
Well, if we're getting about to a point where maybe we can open a black twig and a trade bottles with Alex here. It's fine. I was gonna say 3 bottles is a lot actually in one evening. Need to work on that. Just so Melissa from Minnesota says hi.
Hi, Melissa.
And Emily from San Francisco.
Hello, Emily.
Deborah. Those are all on Facebook. Facebook shout outs. So black twig. So we have not done black twig every year. We've had to skip a couple years because we can't find the apple.
Yeah. So black twig is, at least here in Virginia, black twig it's as well known, but it's less grown. So there's some orchards that have it, but there's other cideries competing for it. We've got some here in our orchard, but we kind of plugged into like a gusher for Arkansas Black with an orchard north of us, and we grow some, but they've got about 2 to 3 acres, and we've been kind of hogging all those. So, I'm not sure how much longer we can do that, but Black Twig, if we can get it, we would do 100%. Our first Black Twig was 100% Black Twig.
And that was 2015 or 16?
I think it might have been before that.
Or this is 16, so it was 14.
Yeah, something like that. And I thought it was exceptional. A lot of people did too. We sold out of that one. That was about 9%. This is 7%. So alcohol varies from year to year, but that year was, when the alcohol hits like in the 9s, it's a really good growing year for us. Just like last year, 2019, all of our ciders are coming up 9.
A little bit drier growing season, I think.
I'm not looking for alcohol per se, but it's an indicator of the quality of the apple that year. So in the subsequent years that we've done Black Twig, which is this one and one other one, we had to augment it with Arkansas Black and Winesap. So this particular one is 2/3 Black Twig, and the other third is 1/3 Arkansas Black and 1/3 Winesap. So that kind of breaks down like 60, 25, 15%. But they're similar apples, and we wanted to keep it true to the strain of the apple somewhat, but it's predominantly Black Twig.
This one has a little more of a vanilla note, or a little more minerality than the Arkansas Black.
So the first Black Twig actually had a spiciness to it that it's kind of hard to put your finger on. But if you start boiling apple cider, you get into cinnamon and like nutmeg flavors, and that came through in that cider. And then some of it's in this one, but and eventually we may get back to 100% Black Twig, which I would do in a heartbeat, but
Finding the volume.
we just don't have that many apples being produced that we can get our hands on. So
you said this was Jackson's
supposedly
favorite cider or favorite apple?
Favorite apple.
Okay.
I don't know about cider, but Andrew Jackson, I think he was born in Virginia, but he ended up in Tennessee somehow, and Northeast Tennessee. And this apple originated right out there where he was from. So that's the story. Don't quote me on it, but.
What did you say? You said there was a different name for it originally.
Twitty's Paragon.
Do you know how it switched from Twitty's Paragon?
I have no idea. It grew on the farm of like Colonel Rankin Tool in like Jones County, Tennessee, which I think it was where it's from. There's Jonesboro, there's Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee. So it's somewhere out in that area, not far across the border from Virginia. So
Whitney on Zoom says that he ended up in Tennessee because of a woman. Jackson did.
it's always the case. But anyhow,
You
it wasn't like Tom.
ended up in North Carolina because of a woman.
Yeah, no, I got there first, but I stayed there because of him.
Yeah.
So.
Terry's asking, do you prefer this one well chilled or closer to room temp?
I like all my ciders chilled. Although once I start drinking, I don't mind if it warms up some, but all cider supposedly and all wine, at least to a certain extent, releases more flavor to your taste as it gets warmer. You want to serve it chilled like white wine, but I've heard that
it has to do with the temperature of your mouth. And getting closer to the temperature of your mouth, you get more.
I've heard that people drink white wine too cold and red wine too hot. So that's just someone else's.
I would say warming this up does release some of those flavor notes that we were talking about, the kind of baking spice and vanilla. It's kind of that back and forth of wanting that crisp, fresh, cold beverage.
What I'm looking for in cider is not sweet. I'm looking for dryness, and I'm looking for astringency, which I'm getting on this. So they did a test at Virginia Tech on a lot of these apples. We helped supply some of the apples, and it turns out that Black Twig has the highest level of tannin of all the apples they tested, which of American cider apples, American apples. The second was Harrison, I think, and the third was Arkansas Black. I'm not sure the exact levels. Harrison actually had the higher level in the flesh, so, but Arkansas Black has a fair amount of tannin, so if you can extract it from the peel, you get more astringency in it. Arkansas Black is right up in there. It's a little lower. So
we were talking about actually earlier maceration as a way to extract tannin and other things from the peel.
that is, I've never done it.
Macerate.
I've never done it.
Describe what maceration is.
Maceration is crushing the apple and letting it sit on it in its mass with the peel in it and the acids. And you can use pectin enzymes to help extract it. But if you've got small batches and you can afford to do that, keep it cold, you can let it sit 24 hours on the peel, the crust peel, and you get presumably more of the tannic component extracted from the peel. I don't have time to do that, so I'm crushing it and it's going right into our press. So whatever's coming out of the peel is happening as we press it. That's probably 15 minutes from crushing to pressing.
So we've got two questions, and I'm going to read them backwards. So Terry, I followed up with that. Would you use a wild ferment for that, for the maceration?
Not necessarily.
So
I
would you
used to
teach
do.
these onto the flesh?
I've done all kinds of stuff with wild ferments, but I'm shying away from it a little bit because with wild ferment, there's wild stuff happens, and sometimes you get more sulfur compounds. So I'm working with David Timmerman, my assistant, and we've settled on some yeast that kind of inhibit or lower the H2S component of fermentation, which you get in all fermentations, but a lot of times it blows off, and if it doesn't, if it gets too strong, and it can actually convert into other sulfur compounds that you don't want. So my early fermentations that I did were all wild. I used no sulfite. I didn't even put yeast in. I used all wild ferment, and they turn out pretty well. So yes, you can do that. If you don't want to fool with putting yeast in it, you just press it and let it go. And my observation is that if you're in the very cold regions of the Northeast, they had trouble with wild ferments. I never had trouble with the wild ferment here. And
Was it halting too early?
Hmm?
Was it halting too early, or just because it was a bad ferment?
I just don't think they have the yeast population that we do. So our yeast, we're doing the job here, because I never put yeast into my early ferments, but I was only doing 5
Pre-Albemarle
gallons,
CiderWorks.
and I wasn't selling it to people. So when you put 5 to 1,500 gallons in the tank, you want to make sure you're going to get something back out of that. So we've conformed to the winemaking convention somewhat.
So, and I do want to clarify also. So I think what Terry might be asking is fermenting during maceration, and I think maceration only lasts for 2 or 3 days. Then you would press the juice out and pitch yeast.
So fermentation starts the moment, well, it starts in the apple before you can pick it. An apple falls on the ground, it goes through a fermentation before it rots, and turns to vinegar. So you can control that. Making cider is controlling the process. So you can let it go wild, but you better control it. You better put an airlock on it. And this came from a woman who worked for Scott Labs and Lala Mound. Like, you should feed this don't starve your yeast, because apples inherently have a low nitrogen concentration, so don't hesitate to put yeast nutrient in, even if you're doing a wild ferment. So
Melissa says she's surprised we haven't tried the maceration technique yet.
it's just
the logistics are a little bit
logistically not good for us, because when we're pressing 10 to 20 bins, this is like a bin is like 900 pounds of fruit, and 10 bins make a 500-gallon tank. So what's that, 9,000 pounds of apples? So we have all this stuff. We don't have anywhere to put it.
Well, it macerates.
Yeah. I know they're doing it in England. I saw it at Thatcher's, of all places. They press and put the pulp into big tanks. These people got like $100 million invested in their facility, but so they hold it and then they put it in the press later. So yeah, if you have that kind of capital investment, you can do it.
You might try some small batches.
If you're on a very small scale, you can do it. But on the scale that we're on, it's not practical. So.
And very belatedly, Todd, a little while ago, but we were on a different discussion, asked, are all 3 bottle conditioned?
No,
/carbonated?
no, we don't bottle condition our ciders. We have one that's we call our brut. It's was bottle conditioned, and it was disgorged, so it's a champagne style.
But these are carbonated. We force carbonate, so we have a carbonation tank that we pump CO2 in, and that carbonates.
It's a converted bright beer tank that we force carbonate in. All our carbonations end up right around 1 atmosphere, which was the old limit, which is we're comfortable with. We like the mouthfeel of it, and so yes, we force carbonate.
But we do have one that we bottle condition, and that's our fruit Albemarle, and then that's disgorged like a champagne.
And we have one still, and if I did anything else, I might produce more still cider.
We were talking that Virginia Hughes Crab would be a good still cider.
Hughes, Harrison, anything with the consistency of those 2 ciders would probably be good still.
Do you have any other questions on Black Twig? I don't think. I think I've caught all of them. Jay and Wingard. So is it she loves the Black Twig, or he? Oh, Valley. Love the Black Twig. Hi, Erica. So we're gonna switch over now, I think. Not to rush us too long, but 15 minutes per. To our Winesap. Well, it is one of my favorites. So the Arkansas Black is one of Chuck's favorites, and the Winesap is one of mine. So this is out of all 3 of these, this is the one that is the true single 100% varietal of Winesap.
Yeah, we got a Kirk on here.
Erica was just saying, I was just thinking about a Hughes still cider. Yes, please. And Kirk says, hey, Chuck and Ann, Hughes should make a good still, but make a tough sell. It would. I disagree.
To make a tough sell, to make a good still cider.
Still cider in general is a hard sell.
I wouldn't do the whole batch, but I have considered doing a smaller batch of still.
I think the American public expects cider to have a little bit of carbonation, but Hughes Crab does have the viscosity to kind of carry it through like a white wine would.
Because a lot of cider is thinner. The first still cider I had, I thought, yeah. And it was from a great cider maker, but I think, no.
That was the first still cider I had, and I thought it was great.
Murdo Laird in California is a good winemaker, I think. And but I thought it was kind of blah. So, but I think that was before I'd had much cider, and I think now a lot of English ciders are still. All cider used to be still. You couldn't keep carbonation in a barrel, so they'd drink it still. So we'll work our way back to that point at some point, but it's got to be cider with body. And I'm betting your doggo would be okay still.
Talking, so we're commenting on Kirk Billingsley over on Facebook, who owns Big Fish Cider out in Monterey, Virginia. Excellent producer. If you've never had Big Fish Cider, look them up. I believe they ship.
They do now.
Yeah. But
Yeah. Erica did a still Harrison. Yeah. We
ooh,
taste
still
them.
Harrison. Yeah, that would be a good idea.
So we taste them all still before we carbonate. So we've had this discussion over and over, just when we're going to pull the string on it. And yes, we will probably split some batches of Harrison and Hughes and do them still. The others I'm not so sure about, but
Well,
those two.
Speaking of others, Winesap.
Winesap, again, it's the parent apple. Winesap is also one of the 3 apples that went into our 1817.
Along with Hughes, Crab, and Harrison.
Hughes, Crab, and Harrison. And according to William Cox, was the best liquor he ever tasted. So Winesap's been around. It has great cider pedigree. We like it. There are different Winesaps. We did a
Different
Winesap.
variations on Winesap.
We did a Winesap the second year. I thought I'd stumble into the mother load of Winesap, and it just did not cut it. So
there's someone who said that there's over 300 variations on Red Delicious, and I think there's a similar problem with Winesap where there's multiple variations.
There is a Winesap that's called the improved Winesap out there. It's a little sweeter and a little blander than the original. Improved, yes. For
Not for cider.
For eating, but it's the old-fashioned Winesap, I think, is what we've tied into in several orchards, and that's the one we want. That's the one that makes a good acidic juice. So don't just go get any Winesap thinking you're going to do this if you're going to make your own. So look for the deep red peel, and that's all I can tell you about that. So
I think so. This Winesap, it has varied for us every year quite a bit, and this particular vintage is one of my favorites. I think you get a really strong minerality. I think you get a little bit of an overripe apple. Kind of, it's been described to me as walking through an orchard and picking up an apple that's fallen on the ground and been on the ground for a day or two and taking a bite of it. So kind of that just strong apple flavor with that mineralness. But I think it's so crisp and great for summer. Others would disagree and say more for fall or winter, just because it's a little more of a punch. But
so the first time we did this, we kind of stumbled into it. Well, you stumbled into a lot of stuff when your name is out there as a cider maker, but we got through some orchard, a bunch of windfalls, and we took them and we made cider from it, and it turned out we made a single variety from it. And compared to our other 3 ciders we had at the time, it was a little bit stark.
Sharper.
Whatever. It just, some people liked it. A lot of people like taking them back. And I don't know how we stumbled on this. Charlotte started me. We had, at the time, we were selling Edwards ham.
Edwards ham, yep.
Out of Suffolk or Surrey, Virginia. And it was Edwards ham. If you haven't had it, it's a really good product. It's lightly salted, but it's like a country ham.
Classic salty Virginia ham.
Yeah. And so we started shaving this ham, and we were putting it on our plowman platter at the time. And then we started letting people like, here, take a bite of this. And they ate this salty ham and they drank the Winesap. And I would bet 95% of the time people walked away with a bottle of Winesap that maybe didn't think they liked it to begin with. So it's, this is one that pairs well with food. This pairs well with ham,
Salt.
salty food, yes.
And salty ham.
If you're asking about food pairing, so.
Really quick, because I
Hey,
didn't
Ron.
acknowledge it before. Yeah, Ron says hi.
Hi, Ron. Cheers.
Also, Megan said, I love the sound of a new bottle opening, which I do too. It means good things coming.
That's like my phone app.
And Emily agrees with the punch, the kind of sharpness on it. Oh, and David on Zoom, Winesap goes well with soy sauce flavored foods too. That saltiness, umami. Yep. Also, all ciders. Also, all ciders taste great with ham. It's kind of my thing with fried chicken. We say one of our ciders goes well with fried chicken, and I think it's cheating because everything goes with fried chicken. So it's same with ham. Everything goes with ham. So there is a little bit, we have an event that we usually have in the fall called our Cider Smackdown. We get ciders from where we can get them from Virginia and different parts of the country. And the idea for that actually came from Cider Days out of Massachusetts, which is an event that's held every November. They did a apple smackdown of North versus South apples. But the Winesap has been one that has been contested as to whether it came from Jersey or Virginia. Hence the reason we named our cider Old Virginia Winesap. But I do think it actually, personally, I think it actually came from Virginia, but there are people from Jersey, but there are people in Virginia that claim it. Connecting Facebook to Zoom, Erica says, hi, David and Bobby. Yes, I haven't had Winesap in a while. We've been kind of focusing on what we consider summer ciders and trying to work through those. And so I haven't had Winesap in a while, and I miss it.
What have we not covered?
What yeast did you use on these?
So we did actually 3 different yeasts, which is unusual. We
For each one had a different yeast?
yeah, but my original opinion, still somewhat my opinion, is that the yeast doesn't really matter. It's more the apple variety that you're using. You need a good yeast, whether it be wild or cultivated. Since we're doing these big volumes, we use cultivated yeast or cultured yeast, if you will. We get our yeast from Scout Labs. So the Arkansas Black, we use one that's made by Anchor, which is a South African yeast company, called Alchemy One. And some type of hybridization, but it's one that's recommended by Scout Labs for cider. For the Winesap, we use one, I forget who makes it, it's called Cross Evolution. That's one we're probably going to go back and use again. We may use Alchemy One again, but I can go into some more yeast stuff later. But the Black Twig was Elixir, which they don't recommend for cider, but I just like the name of it and the sound of what it did. So I used Elixir for a while.
We sometimes buy a book by its cover.
So, and if you haven't tried, David can attest to this. I stumbled into the back of the cider handbook at Scott Labs, 4 yeasts that are low sulfur producing yeast. Sulfur is a bane to cider makers, especially sulfur that stays in the juice after you ferment it. If it gases out, it's no problem. The sulfur being produced all during fermentation, but it stays in the juice, and if it converts into like sulfur compounds that you can't get rid of, like mercaptans, which are cabbage and burnt rubber, and even worse,
Hair salon, not good.
anyhow, you don't want that.
Burns.
Hydrogen sulfide has a boiling point of 4 degrees centigrade, so it tends to blow off even percent of the juice. So you can deal with hydrogen sulfide, but those other things just don't go away. You don't want those. So
So this year
there's
we're
4
looking at
yeasts. No, we used them this year. In the 2019, we used, I'm just doing this off the top of my head because I can't remember it. I don't have the book. It's ICV, what is this one? ICV, okay. ICV, okay. We just did it.
David's helping us
David's
out.
helping me out. Then we use one called Sensi, and then there's one ICV B-thiol. And thiol is basically an amino acid. It's essential in yeast growth and development. And ICV B fruits, which is supposed to put a fruitium. And you know, it's amazing. They actually did, and we've had very little sulfur issues in all of our 2019 ferments that we use these in.
It also is a very good growing year, I think.
Well, it's good, but
But
there is, you know, I discounted yeast before, but I think we're gravitating towards some of these newer varieties, yeast that are coming on that are low sulfur producers, and it allows the fruit to express itself better when you don't have that competing aroma. So more on that to come. This
check
is just
2019 vintage. We got to work through a couple before we get there. But
Yeah.
we'll get there. Kirk on Facebook asked a question about what ciders you blend in Winesap, and so our Arkansas Black, we blend Pippin in, the Black Twig, the Black Twig, we blend Arkansas Black and Winesap in, but the Winesap is actually 100%. It's a single varietal.
Right. And we use it in 1817. I wouldn't hesitate to blend Winesap with anything, but
we use it as a blender, but this particular, the Old Virginia Winesap is 100% Winesap apples.
and it's also usually in our somewhere in our Jupiter's Legacy, which is another blend, and
Red Hill.
And Red Hill.
We
and
use it as a blender, but not.
And it may even end up in Plum Mary and Ragged Mountain, which is our sweetened ciders that can be anything. But I wouldn't hesitate to blend Winesap in anything. But if it's not the old-fashioned Winesap, yeah, you need to blend it into something because it's not really good by itself. So if it's the old-fashioned Winesap, it has this flavor, can go by itself, in my opinion, and it can blend in almost anything. So
Definitely has a distinctive flavor.
if you have a fruity, like citrusy, like cider, like Gold Rush or Pippin, you probably you wouldn't put a lot of Winesap in there to maintain the fruitiness of it, because it's gonna cut that back. I consider Winesap a mineral forward cider.
As most cider apples are divided between sharp, bitter sharp, sweet, and bittersweet. So sweet are going to be your Golden Delicious and Fuji, not good for much. But your sharp is what Winesap is usually classified as, which is your acid.
It's a high acid apple. It's a sharp apple, although the acid's not huge. But the only thing I can say about Winesap as far as its fruitiness is, and I never picked it out on my own. My friend Ben Watson pointed out, it has a strawberry note. And a lot of apples don't, but this one does.
It tastes like if you're eating an unripe strawberry to me, and you get right to that top, right at where it's white, and
Yeah.
that's what it tastes like to me.
And like Pippin is citrus, Gold Rush is citrus, Winesap of any fruit, and maybe Arkansas Black has a
Or
strawberry
the
note.
red fruit, the berry fruits.
Whatever, yeah, it's I don't have great taste. I listen to other people and
And he knows what he likes.
I know what I like. So.
That's what's important. Nikki said, yep, once you suggested it, she can taste it. What apple do you wish we could grow here? Like something that doesn't grow here normally. And what apple do you have the most of?
We got a hodgepodge of a bunch. I would say in terms of number of trees, Harrison, and we can grow it here, and we're going to grow more of it here. It does well here. Hughes crab is next. It fights fire blight all the time, but I just trimmed a bunch of fire blight, and I just sprayed a bunch of copper on it just to help seal the deal, and I hope I've arrested it. But besides that, it's a great cider apple. We've got a lot of Wixon in the ground here. We're starting to put in some red flesh varieties because we want to do we've done a red flesh cider, which is coming out.
We have a red flesh coming.
And
Orchard
we
Blush.
want to grow more of it here. We put in some more Winesap. I haven't put as much emphasis on Winesap because Winesap is grown in a number of orchards around us, and we can actually buy Winesap and Arkansas Black. We've got Black Twig in the ground.
So what do we wish we could grow here?
What do I wish we could grow here? I don't know. I'm not too big
Kingston
on
Black?
Yeah, we've got some. It's just terrible. So I would not put a lot of emphasis on growing Kingston Black. If you're anywhere.
No, but that's what she's saying is if we were anywhere in the world, and what could we grow, even though it doesn't grow well here?
Well, yeah, the British cider apples are great.
That's right. David said wish we could grow more bittersweet varieties here. Davenant, Chisel, Jersey, Arlington Mill.
I'm not sure we can't grow some of them, but we're looking at it. We've got some out here to do. They grow fairly well, like Wilma's Norman. Wait till David tastes that one. It's like, it'll turn your mouth inside out, but it actually grows here okay. Kingston Black, not so well.
Erica says Golden Russet, although Golden Russet does okay here. It's a tip bearer, so it's not a great grower in general.
I've never gotten a lot of production on it. It's a great apple. We bought it from other orchards, and it's in our russet blend, probably 25%, along with about 30–40% Ashmead kernel. So we have a russet blend as our cidermaker number 4, if you haven't had it.
You know what I'd like to grow a lot of and have a single varietal of. I have tasted one single varietal from this apple out in Washington State is Medal d'Or.
Good luck.
So something to grow here, Medal d'Or.
We have 3 trees and
Gold
have produced a lot from us, but I've listened to other cider makers from up north and other places. Porter's Perfection. We got a couple that we hand grafted in the nursery that, if I can get them out, but we're cider makers now. We're not orchardists. So we have a bunch of stuff. We don't have enough of anything. I mean, we do. We can make a great batch of cider out of what we have. We essentially do that with our Jupiter's Legacy. Most of our stuff goes into Jupiter's Legacy. So we have 5 or 6 crab apples. We have a bunch of russet apples. We have Black Twig, we have Arkansas Black. We have Winesap. We have White Winter Pearmain. We have Wine Crisp. We have, I could go on. We have 200 some varieties. We got a Wixon coming out. Wixon is pretty good. Doggo, Kirk's done a Doggo. We put our Doggo this year in our red flesh.
Orchard Blush coming out soon.
Orchard Blush coming out. And so, I can talk to you and see what you like, and I can tell you what I think you should plant, but it's like asking Tom Burford what his favorite apple was. He says, the last one I ate. So
it's a loaded question. We wish we could grow everything here. Just catching up on a couple things. Terry says, what is fire blight? It's a bacterial infection of apples that gets in through flowers that's more prevalent in hot and humid areas, such as we are in.
Well, bacteria grows when it's greater than 60 degrees. So if you're in an area, and it attacks a tree mainly during bloom, it can also attack tender shoots. which are happening now. So there are things we do to try to prevent shoot growth. And we try to spray streptomycin during bloom, but we try to treat for bacteria all during the spraying season, and we're still doing that. I just sprayed copper, which commercial orchards can't do or won't do because it causes russeting on fruit. Personally, I don't care about russet on an apple I'm going to press, so I went ahead and sprayed a full copper load right after I trimmed a bunch of fireblade out of my used crab. So you do what you got to do, but
so fireblight, what fireblight is, so it's,
so fireblade is called Amo something. There's a name for it, a scientific name, and it grows in warm temperate climates. So it's spreading north as global warming occurs. So it attacks certain varieties way more than others. Like a Hughes crab is prone to it. It's not as prone as Cox orange pippin or
I would say varieties that were developed more north.
It's Sopa Spitzenberg. They're just, it's like a death on those trees, and it gets into a lot of the English cider varieties here. So that's why we don't try to grow them. It's not that we could, if we could, we would.
So it makes them difficult to grow in this area.
So the further north you are and the cooler it is when bloom occurs, the less fire blight pressure. But I've seen pictures in Michigan where fire blight is destroyed an orchard. Gala, definitely, I mean, it wiped out the whole orchards of Gala. And if you're a commercial grower and you're growing huge blocks of a certain variety and you get fire blight in it, you're screwed essentially. So it is temperature dependent. It's weather dependent. You know, wet weather, warm wet weather contributes to bacterial growth. And the way you combat it is with streptomycin or copper. There are things you can do, or you cut it out, or you get rid of the tree and get something that's not as prone to fire blight. So
it's a struggle. It's one of the things that southern apple growers have to deal with that other parts of the country don't have to deal with as much. And it's unique, actually. Fire blight is, I believe, the only bacterial infection that happens.
no, I doubt that, but it's the one it kills the tree. It'll make the fruit rot on the branch, and it kills the tree.
It's not fungal or viral, which is what most of the diseases are.
It's not, but most of it's fungus. It causes rot. Fire blight actually will kill the tree, especially you don't want it in young trees because it'll run right to the root and kill it. As the tree gets older and more mature, fire blight strike in the outer limb doesn't necessarily affect the tree, and you can survive it. But you need to be aware of it if you're trying to grow apples.
Indeed. Kurt comments that single varietals are interesting, but blends are the most enjoyable, and that is definitely an opinion of most of the cider world. We just like experimenting with single varietals.
I would disagree. We're tasting essentially single varietals here, and yeah, for the rank and file cider industry, yeah, they're going to do well, one, if everybody tried to do varietals, there wouldn't be enough apples to go around. So, but I think there are varieties that are Harrison, Hughes, and you even did one this year. So, yes, I don't disagree. And you can produce a lot more complexity by layering it in.
And I think that's where the sentiment comes from, is you can definitely fill in gaps in acidity and flavor profiles by blending in.
So I did a single variety pink lady. And when I got done, it did nothing for me. It was very acidic. I like the taste of the apple, but it did not measure up to my idea of a single variety. So it went into a blend, but not every apple is going to provide that. So, and there are a range of tastes. So yes, for the most part, blends are going to predominate because that's what you end up with. People that don't have access to 20 bins of black twig are not going to do a single variety from it. So, and we can't even get 10 bins. So,
well, I think as I said, I think varietals can be more complex and have more things going for them. But I think the exploration of single varietals is definitely interesting and can provide kind of more the broad spectrum and broad spectrum and farther reaches on it. I know.
I'm not sure why we got off on single varieties to begin with, but we early on
had so many apples.
Well, no, early on with my small batches, I did Pippin, I did Stamen, and I got off into Harrison and crab apples when I had them. Because I was only doing 5 gallons, and they were standing up to people's taste. And so we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of cider in this country. So we don't have enough production of Hughes Crab and Harrison for everybody to do a single variety from it. But or Gold Rush even, which is coming on, or Pippin. So there's a lot of territory out there yet to be explored. I've heard Porter's Perfection. I've had a Kingston Black varietal. So you can't argue against those ciders standing alone. But yes, blends are probably the way to go for most ciders. And you can produce more complexity that way. But, you know,
We just like to have fun with it.
well, no, I just like these. It would be a travesty to me almost to put something in a Harrison, except Hughes Crab and Winesap to make 1817. So I like Harrison by itself, kind of like Hughes Crab by itself. Yes, they make the book on Harrison was blended with Campfill and Granny Winkle, and that was a cider. But I've tasted Campfill, apple, and Granny Winkle, and they're hard to grow. And
in this area,
I'm firmly convinced that the reason they did that is to make those ciders palatable. So
I will say I know there are other cideries doing single varietals around the country, but one that we've been enjoying a lot lately is Haykin Cider out of Colorado, Haykin. There's a lot of they have a lot of different single varietals. And recently I tried a varietal that I didn't ever think I would use in cider, Shenango Strawberry, and it was quite amazing. So I don't think they have it right now on their list, but if you ever get a chance to try their
good luck on finding any Shenango Strawberry. We got 2 trees.
We have 2 trees.
I'll give them all to you. If you want to do a 10-gallon batch, I'll give them all to you.
But they do a good job. We're kind of wrapping up here. We're reaching the 6 o'clock mark. It's one of the longest ones we've done. It's been a lot of questions. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll be posting this around so you'll see it. But I don't have dates for the next one yet. Alex
2 weeks,
right? Alex is about to give them to me.
We got to do one for the Wicks and then the Orchard Bluff.
We should do one for the 2 new varietals. Those are coming out soon. But I think the next one is a Meet the Cider Maker. That's you.
June 7th.
On June 7th.
Anybody that know me, hi.
So we'll be doing more talking about cider making, possibly do a cidery tour, things along those lines. And then the June bottle bundle, which will be coming out June 1st, we'll do a tasting event on the 24th. So thank you all for joining us.
Cheers.
We're signing off of Facebook, heading back over to the Zoom call. If you want to join us on the Zoom call next time, make sure to order the bundle or reach out to us and we'll give you the Zoom login.